Constitutional Assembly is committed to a transparent and inclusive process of drafting the new Constitution. This program is brought to you by the Constitutional Assembly to help you understand the issues that are being debated in the process of writing our country's new Constitution.
Good evening and welcome to the last episode of our Constitutional Talk series. The constitution-making process has drawn to a close. We know that behind this process, a lot of work went into it by the Constitutional Assembly. Before we get into the discussion of what the Constitutional Assembly did, let us view an insert on the work done by the CA.
Arthur Mfolozi, a funeral director from Lusigisi in the Transkei, like many South Africans, is concerned about our new constitution and favoured community public meetings which allowed the public to meet members of the CA and air their views.
I had my son, who is a member of the ANC in the area, and I asked him whether there was a preparation for those people that came into Lusigisi about the constitutional talk. And he said to me it was so well organized that there were buses from each location that took people to town. And everybody was given a chance to talk about his needs, personal needs. So I believe everybody was informed and everybody did contribute to the talk about the Constitution.
The Constitutional Assembly has met its two-year mandate to produce a constitution that reflects the concerns and values of a broad political spectrum and society as a whole. The public have been involved in the process all the way, submitting proposals and suggestions which have been taken into account. The Constitutional Assembly consists of 400 members of Parliament and 90 senators. In order to carry out its task of drafting a new constitution, it was divided into 6 30-member theme committees, each entrusted with the specific area of the constitution and each assisted by technical experts who studied international precedents and South Africa's unique situation. A huge media campaign, including the Constitutional Assembly's own newsletter, advertising and television debates, kept the public informed of their progress. All views were considered by the 46-member Constitutional Committee, headed by Constitutional Assembly Chairperson Cyril Ramaphosa and Deputy Chairperson Leon Wessels.
Thank you.
The community public meetings allowed people in remote areas to have a say in the drafting of our constitution.
Okay, my proposals to the Constitutional Assembly is this. Thomas Bongo, Ragobela. Yes. My proposal to the Constitutional Assembly is this. I would like the Constitutional Assembly to have the law that will protect farm workers from being harassed and then killed by farmers. That is my first point. And then my second input is this. I would like the Constitutional Assembly to work on this question. There must not be any official government. Any official government official that must misappropriate the taxpayers' money. That is my second question.
On the 8th of May 1996, the new constitution was approved by a two-thirds majority of the 490-member Constitutional Assembly. The new constitution ensures that equality and human dignity will be protected and promoted, and that we will have an open and transparent democracy.
If they look at the needs, then it means they're going to attend to the needs of the people, and that is good for them, for the people. Because that is what the people want. If it is the government of the people, it must satisfy the needs of the people.
The Constitutional Assembly's motto was, "Nothing behind or above the heads of the people." This guided how it shared information with the public, media, and the nature of the public participation process.
A call came that I should be seconded to the Constitutional Assembly. The Constitutional Assembly was tasked with writing the new constitution, So it was all new. We had to create a new structure, a new everything to start the work. So I was recruited to go there to be the deputy director responsible for media liaison.
You were so young to be called on to take a position as the deputy director. What was the feeling in that moment, especially with the background that you've shared, that you were writing expose articles at that time? What were you thinking? What were you feeling about your contribution to this process?
Quite frankly, the beginning was a bit daunting. It was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do once I'm there. But when we started, as I said, we all knew the institution was new, so we were all learning. But I think there were people who had a clear idea of what needed to be done. People like Hassan Ibrahim, the executive director, I would think Louis Azondo, Marion Spark. So we had several workshops to, brainstorm what needs to be done, broadly speaking, but in the various sections, like what was my job as the director responsible for media liaison. That had to be workshopped. It was not solely my idea, so it had to be workshopped as it happened with all other sections of the administration of the Constitutional Assembly. But I think the good thing is that once that happened, we all got running and we're a team. So while that was my responsibility, but I had a team of the entire structure of the Constitutional Assembly. We didn't have issues of seniority and juniority. We brainstormed together. We effectively worked together. And that helped even those who would have regarded themselves as senior, because we were helped by the ideas of everybody, including the junior people that were working. While we were trying to get our feet, government departments were themselves trying to get their feet. They were restructuring. New people were coming in. I remember at the time there was something called the South African Communications Council or something, which has been replaced by the GCIS. So it was such a time when everything was being reinvented. So in terms of communication, there was one guiding principle that we had in mind, and that was that transparency. Whatever we do is relevant to the public. There was nothing that was not supposed to be told to the public. Yet I think you would have known that the philosophy in the previous government was that of hoarding, hiding. And we came with a different approach, which was everything must be made public. People must know, people must actually take part in the process.
Can I take you back to the very first messaging that you did? For instance, let's choose TV. What was the first campaign that you put out there to get people to start participating?
On TV, well, we had adverts with a number of messages, but we thought we should use TV to get people to talk and audiences to see or watch and listen to what the constitution making process is about. So we conceptualized, in fact, all our media productions were under the theme Constitutional Talk. So we had a newsletter called Constitutional Talk. We had a TV show called the Constitutional Talk. We had radio shows called Constitutional Talk, because we wanted to make it a conversation. So on TV, we had the show, I think it was every Wednesday. Forgive me if it's not every Wednesday, but at least once a week for 30 minutes, moderated by now retired Judge Dennis Davis, and a professor. He was a professor at the University of Durban-Westville, which is now part of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Professor Mandla Mpunu, who were moderating that program. So what we would do, we'd take, for example, the concept, the issue of workers' rights. because that was an issue that had to be translated into the constitution. So we divide politicians from the Constitutional Assembly.
Answer?
We believe that every person in South Africa should have the freedom to enjoy his or her fruits of his labor.
Would invite members of trade unions and would invite members of the public to a conversation.
Whose values are we talking about? Because Ken wants to constitutionalize what he calls free enterprise, which to others might mean exploitation.
At the SABC, we had a studio there, at the SABC, talking about workers' rights, not in a way that you want to educate them, but all those issues of minimum wage.
Let's find out whether there is real disagreement about profession, or occupation. Mr. Hofmeyer.
In fact, the term occupation is quite a wide one, and I don't think any court is going to argue that professions are not included under the broader term occupation.
And so forth, would come up in those discussions. So audiences out there would understand what workers' rights are about, would understand what needs to be done, or certainly from the point of view of other, because there were those who do not believe in workers' rights.
What is the understanding of the Nationalist Party about freedom of economic activity?
Well, we're not married to the title of that right, but we believe that the right should go into the Constitution.
Or they wanted them done in a particular way, etc. But those conversations would educate people, they would inform people there about what is this whole thing about. So every show had a theme: human rights, workers' rights, all sorts of issues that needed to be translated, synthesized into the Constitution. And that is how many people got to know what we're talking about. That is how we use TV. Radio was more or less the same thing. I used to travel with politicians to studios of almost all radio stations where, and then the interesting thing about that, it was all politicians. We didn't mind whether it's IFP or there's ANC or there's National Party. Whoever was available would go with them. They sit in the studio, they ask questions about the work of the Constitutional Assembly, and then this particular topic would be discussed. And there they were, they're talking about it.
Is there anything that you noticed that really stuck to people in terms of your communications or your publication?
Yeah. I think one of the things we did, which we again, it's a practical example of saliency. So we had established the constitutional talk light. And the question was, how do we get people to call this talk live? It was an 0800 number, so this is free. But you need to then overcome that barrier of actually picking the phone up and calling to leave it. The first one is just to make it work. But we had, and I'm sure if you apply your mind even today, there are different assets that you could use. We had biggest asset at the time, it was Nelson Mandela. And there was a picture Georgiana had taken, and he had Mandela walking. And I'd seen that picture. And that evening, I mocked it up and I went to Marion and I said, whatever you use this picture, can we get permission from the presidency to use this picture? Because it was saliency at its best, right? Everybody recognized that. And he had a phone and he was making his submission. And we launched with that. We did it as a poster in the newspapers, and it went crazy. In today's terms, it went viral. So we saw an uptick in the number of calls coming in after that poster was done. So that, for me, was what saliency was about. The other very kind of what you would think has been mundane today was back then we had said that, yes, it's complex. And so Trish de Villiers, who was our artist, cartoonist at the time, and myself, we sat down and we said, how do we make this really come alive? And we then came up with the idea of this comic strip at the back of the constitutional talk, which tackled key issues. And it went through things like your right to practice a religion, or religious freedom, or language, or whatever the issues were at the time. And we would tell the story, but we always started off and ended off with a bit of humor. And humor is a very difficult thing, right? But if you get it right, it can be extremely salient. You click and you'll get it. And then it's like, okay, I got this now. So and if you go through, you'll see at the beginning of each comic strip and the end of each comic strip, there's this little clever, flamerish, points, witty points that are made. but that resonate with you. And the nice thing was, again, those pictures that I referred to earlier on of an old man leading the publication at the meeting. There's a very serious look in his face. He was reading it. And then he gets to the back of it again, and you see this picture. There's a series of pictures that were taken, and the last one with a big smile on his face. And this was a cartoon done in English in a deep rural Eastern Cape setting, who you think it wouldn't resonate, but because the images were very simple and salient, they resonated.
So, what role does Edward bring you into?
We were in the operations team for the public participation program, or the South African Communication Service. Was very well positioned, as they were probably the first government department who were able to reach rural areas and have community coordinators, I think they were called at the time. And they had these regional offices. So I think there was a meeting in the SACS head office where we discussed how we can reach the communities. I was advanced or promoted to a project coordinator in the division project management. My project manager was a man with the name of Barner Harms. We were in that meeting, and then we came up with the proposal to use the regional offices. Then the plan was to use the regional offices to roll out the public participation program. But there was a decision that we can't use all the SACS employees to do like the constitutional education program and the community liaison on the ground. And that's where people like Cassandra and Beck and Kizi, and they were doing education on that. So my role from the head office, our operations team, was to get this information from them, and they would identify like contentious issues on the ground. We would develop a report that would go to the committees, and then we would organize public meetings. We would give the information to the various committees in Parliament, right? And then those committees, we would deliberate, and they would. I wasn't in that, I was administrative. And then we would identify committee members, which were members of Parliament also, and we would then take them to the community and have a public meeting as close to the community of issues, identified issues, as possible. This was done in conjunction with the Air Force. So believe it or not, I was managing flight schedules at the age of 25 for the Air Force.
You were so young.
It's so insane. I think that's the beauty of being young, because I wouldn't have the guts, I think, to do that now.
Which role were you appointed for?
So, Constitutional Education Manager. So we had two. There was a deputy, and I always wondered, we work very collegiately. I certainly would always work very collegiately. So there wasn't a hierarchy as such. But the deputy you've interviewed, two of them, Greg and Derek, they were responsible. They were much more involved in drafting documents and in Know Your Rights campaigns. And so they did the drafting the educational material and the workshop programs and so on. We also had, across the country, we had provincial coordinators. And that was where I came in as the manager of the program. We had two per province, but we lost one, and I can't remember the province, which is very bad. So we had 17 individuals located across the country. And they then worked in each of their areas, in each of their provinces, with the NGOs going down. So it was a dissemination program of all the material that was going down. The interview process for that was quite something, because 3 of us went around the country from city to city to city, interviewing a list of candidates who'd been shortlisted, and that was, I think we did, I don't know, 70 interviews in a week or something. I mean,
Wow.
because we just, we had to get it, because the constitutional drafting process had 18 months with a 6-month contingency.
Yeah.
So we had, and we started in the beginning of 95, and we just had to hit the ground running and find all of those people. And we did it, and we got a group of people who then did all of their own work in each of the provinces. So they were, again, the ones who did the heavy lifting, because they had to then contact and communicate and disseminate and get people aware and enthusiastic about the detail. It's because their part of it was encouraging people to write in, to participate, to be involved. There was a whole communications department, which which was doing the much bigger, broader communication work on, guess what, we're drafting a constitution, please come and write, please come and submit your thoughts and the ways of doing that. But we were more detailed, more thorough, really, in what now needs to happen, which is the understanding of why the constitution is important, what it means when you've got a good constitution, what it means for the individual living in South Africa.
So you find yourself appointed to the Constitutional Assembly. How old are you when this is happening?
That was 95, so I was 33.
So when you walk in, like you said, Derek Fine had been sort of heading the education department. So what role do they give you to take over?
My official title was Deputy Manager of the Constitutional Education Program. So that was already up and running. There were 2 aspects to that public participation process, or at least the awareness raising around it. So there was a separate department focused on what is known as the above-the-line communications, which was essentially television ads, radio ads, posters all around, billboards, all of those kind of things. And we were focused on the below the line. So that was building on my experience with, conducting and designing and conducting workshops in rural areas on human rights at a time when, we were transitioning. People knew very little about human rights. So our NGO was doing a lot of public education around the community-based education. And my role was to take that over and to do the more sort of NGO-styled communication techniques, pamphlets, booklets, posters, things translated into all indigenous languages, all South Africa's languages. And then we also had to figure out how to reach out to people who weren't able to access television and radio and didn't see these big billboards around. So we developed a database of NGOs and designed an add-on. So most of the NGOs at the time had workshops on human rights or had workshops on gender equality or whatever their focus was. So rather than reinventing the wheel, we designed an add-on to the existing workshops to save money and to get as much outreach as possible. We couldn't do it. We were a small staff. We couldn't educate the entire country. And so when they were running a workshop on whatever it was, access to health or whatever it might be, at the end of the process or at the end of the workshop to add on a section on what is going on with the Constitutional Assembly, what is it doing, what are human rights, what is a constitution. We didn't have human rights in our constitution before then. The constitution was not really something anyone really knew about. And then how do you participate in that process? And as you know, that was the key distinguishing feature of the constitution making process, was that public participation. We pretty much pioneered that.
Section 59 of the Constitution ensures that public participation is a central aspect of our democracy, with the National Assembly required to facilitate public involvement in the legislative and other processes of the Assembly and conduct its business in an open manner. Why is it still important that public participation happen in South Africa today?
It's very important because let's look at an ordinary issue like, say, a road in a village. There's not one view on what should be done. If the politicians think we must build a road, well, because there are potholes, because whatnot, there could be a number of reasons why that road should be built. Imagine if someone came and said, you know what, perhaps we need to upgrade the school, because that is real our future. The road, we can struggle as we've been struggling, but imagine our children who are studying under a tree. Then you see the importance of public participation, because now it's no longer the expert, it's no longer the decision maker, it's an ordinary person interpreting the situation as they see them, putting their priorities on the table. So it is very important, because public participation enables policymakers to do exactly what people want.